Welcome to the ACS Podcast family.
We're your hosts, Angella and Charlene.
Where every week you can find new material centered around your life.
Thanks for joining us on our journey. Welcome to week 2 on our monthly topic of perceptions.
Yes, today we're going to be talking about how expectations play a role in the perceptions of what's going on around us.
Exactly. So there's so many different ways that we perceive things through, we talked about this last week, through your sight, through your hearing, through your feelings, through your, help me out here, what was the other one?
Well, by the way that things feel, we can perceive it through textures, and a lot of our perceptions come from our past experiences, things that we've been through before, things that we were taught to believe that we've never questioned. We don't even know why we believe these things, but it's things that we believe are true. One of the biggest examples I can think of is our beliefs around money and how we feel about money and how we perceive money and what connotation and context we put it in. Money is huge. We have this perception that we want it, but we also have a perception that people that have it are evil. We have a perception that if we do that, that we're not spiritual. We have a perception that if we have it, other people will look down on us. So there's a lot of push-pull energy with money, but those perceptions play a huge part into what we bring into our experience.
Absolutely. Even if that we have it, we have to hold on to it. We have to hoard it because no more is going to come to us. And what if? I mean, what if happens all the time. So my husband and I are really great examples of that. I am raised to be like a money hoarder. Like, I hold on to it and I'm like, no, we can't spend any of it. And he's like, oh, we're going to dinner. And I'm like, no, but there's food in the fridge. It's this terrible, we balance it. That's not terrible. But my perception of money and his perception of money are so different. He just thinks it's free flowing. He's going to go to work and it's just going to keep on coming in. So when it comes in, you know, we use it for what we need to use it for. Not always being frivolous, but sometimes being frivolous where I'm like, okay, the money came in. Lock it up in the savings account because it's going to stop at some point. And that limits the universe and God and everybody being able to bless me because I just like hold on to it and I don't let it just keep flowing in, even though I still go to work and it's going to be coming in.
So although we're not going to be spending a lot of time talking about money today, if that is a topic that you would like to see more about, send us a quote on that or send us a note or drop us a line and let us know that you'd like to hear more about it. We would love to dive into that some more. A closing comment on that, though, is just remember when it comes to money or energy or anything else in your life, energy goes where energy flows. So as Charlene was talking about locking that up tight and blocking down the flow of energy through money is just the exchange of energy. So blocking that down and putting it in that savings account and going, no, we can't spend it, that really blocks you from receiving more. So
exactly.
You can think about that in your own life and how that might pertain to what you're going through or what your beliefs are about money. But as we get into that, that's a great example of what our expectations are, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what are your expectations? We'll stay on this topic for just a second. But what are your expectations around money then when you're thinking about that? You talk about the difference between you and your husband and where your expectations are with that. How do you think that influences your perceptions?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. Like, I feel like I gotta just, lock it down and hold on to it because it might go away. So I perceive this amount of scarcity around us, even though that's not what happens. I perceive that the world is essentially going to end. I'm a doomsdayer. Just today. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. I don't believe that about you for 1 second. We both know that's not true.
It always feels like if I spend it, it's going to go away because it does. So it's like this. I'm handing it over at the store. I'm handing it over, when I'm paying a bill, or I'm handing it over and then it's leaving me. So then I feel like as soon as it's gone, it's like poof, gone forever. But
I think many of us feel the same way. And so spending some time or maybe doing a month on money in the future would be a really helpful topic for a lot of us out there, for ourselves and for all of our listeners.
For sure. Sorry, tangent.
No, tangents are good. We like those here. You guys like that, right?
Okay, so expectations and our perception, right? Or how we expect it to feel. So if we talk about, I just read this article, and I know we chatted about it a little bit ago, but your brain plays this huge part on what you perceive to be real or perceive to not be real. So there was a study done way back in the 1950s where people were set up to those shocking devices where they would shock you and it would hurt and you would know that this pain was coming. So they would put it on your fingers and it would give you a little shock and they would get scared. And then they took it off one hand and they said, hey, we're going to put a numbing agent on this. And they put hand lotion on and then they put the little shocking devices back on and they were like, yeah, I didn't feel it at all. Even though the little shocks never stopped, the current never did, but your brain turned off those pain receptors and it said, this isn't going to hurt you anymore. You're going to be just fine. And this big study, 100% of the people that had hand lotion on did not feel the shocks in that situation. So just limiting your beliefs on if you can or cannot do something, or if something will or will not hurt, can alter the reality of it right from the beginning.
Absolutely. And there's lots of studies that have been done on different things that are just like that, on how our mind locks us into what we believe and what we perceive. And that plays a big role in the relationships that we have in our lives too, in a lot of different ways. We believe that people should respond and act just like we do.
For sure.
And that's not necessarily the case. As a matter of fact, it's not going to be the case because we all have different backgrounds, we all have different upbringings, and we all have different experiences. And even when we're sitting in the same place, having the same experience, what we're taking away from that experience, just like we talked about last week, can be very different. So one thing that really caught my attention was a while back, I saw a post on Facebook about a guy who was driving down the road and saw a lady stopped on the side of the road with a flat tire. And he stopped and he helped this lady with her flat tire. And she went on her way, he went on his way, and he came home and he was talking about it on Facebook. And he was talking about how ungrateful she was, how she didn't thank him, how she didn't give him any cash, how she didn't give him anything. And my initial reaction to that was, well, did you do it with an expectation of how she was going to be, or did you do it because it made you feel good to stop and help someone? And that's just one example of how we have these perceptions that when we do something for somebody, they should act or respond a certain way. Now, we don't know what was going on in that lady's life. We have no idea if she was having a family emergency, if she was, in the middle of a crisis, or whatever that case may be. But for her to respond or not respond in a certain way, there was an expectation put on her that she was unaware of.
Right. And who knows, when you're in a sense of crisis, sometimes you think things and you think you say them, but you don't say them. It's just living around in your head. And she could have been, thanking him a million times in her head, but so terrified of being stuck on the side of the road that no words actually came out.
Right. And again, we're projecting and making up a story for this lady that was on the side of the road. Right. It could have been a normal, everyday thing, and she could have been worried about who was stopping to help her. As you're sitting there on the side of the road and some stranger pulls up and you're a lady out there all by yourself, what kind of perceptions are running through your head with somebody stopping on the side of the road to help you? I mean, we all watch the news. Well, some of us watch the news. Right. But if you do watch the news, a lot of times that fills us with this dread and with this sense of everybody in the world is out to get us. So if you're sitting out in the middle of nowhere and you're going through this situation and some strange guy walks up and helps you, what are you thinking and feeling inside? So although she might have been grateful, she could have been terrified. Right. You have no idea.
I also love that as we're talking about this, we perceive her to be this meek, mild woman who is like really grateful but maybe scared, and really she could have just been the Wicked Witch of the West, and she was like, whatever, thanks for fixing my tire, and get back in her car just because she assumed that some man should just come along and fix it for her. Like, again, we're making our just assumptions and our perception over it just based on how we would possibly feel being scared or on the side of the road.
Right. And, another story, I have a friend who wrote a blog, And she wrote her blog about how she wants to have a bed and breakfast and how she wants to serve people food and all of this other stuff, and talking about how excited she would be to do it, and then realized that she's not feeling the gratitude that she was expecting from her family. So she actually doesn't like to do that for her family, but is that the reason that she's doing it for her family and getting back to her roots and doing it because it makes her feel good, because that's how she wants to be in her family life, and recognizing that her family should get the best of her, not strangers. But that also shows a lot of times that we take advantage of our family, or we take for granted our family and the people that are around us, that we don't show them the appreciation and the gratitude because we just expect that they're going to do certain things, that we expect our husbands are going to be out mowing the lawn, and we expect that they're going to go shovel the snow, or our husbands expect that there's going to be dinner on the table when we come home, or they expect, that childcare, or whatever the expectations are, or the way that you have your household set up. There's just a lot of expectations there, and we lose the ability to appreciate what our significant other does for us based on those expectations.
Absolutely. I think there's really nothing that a human being hates more than being told that their expectations are wrong. That even if it's, let's say that you witnessed somebody rear-ending somebody and you were like, no, I know, I saw it, but then there's a video of it and you're like, that is not what I saw. Like, there's nothing that's going to infuriate you more if your expectations, even for yourself, are off because of how you perceived it to be. You thought that that person was definitely at fault for rear-ending that person, or you definitely think that your significant other should be out shoveling the snow because, you made breakfast. So, there's nothing human-wise, I think, more upsetting than us having the wrong expectations altogether just on life.
Right. I totally agree with that. So one of the things that we can do is kind of step back and think about that invisible boundary that we have in our heads. This even applies to professional settings, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with people in the past who talk about when coworkers or other people are showing up late. If you're late for a meeting, and how that's not acceptable, and how you weren't raised that way and you would never show up 10 minutes late for a meeting, but your coworker finds it acceptable to do that all of the time. And that's just an invisible boundary. That's an expectation. That's something that we have in our heads based on our perceptions, based on what we were taught, that the other person might not have. So finding some compassion for some of that, some common ground, and maybe asking questions rather than making some of those assumptions can actually help relieve that fear of, well, I don't want to be wrong. Well, I don't want my expectations to be wrong. I don't want my beliefs to be wrong. Because nobody's saying that your beliefs are right or wrong. They are your beliefs. They are your perceptions. But the best way to learn and grow and expand and maybe be able to shift and move is to get curious and ask questions about why people are doing, acting, and behaving in the way that they are.
For sure. And that even goes along into parenting. So my 15-year-old and I got in our first fight, which is weird. I know that we went that long, but we just always had this just relationship that was just always cohesive. Everything that we were thinking, everything that we were doing just blended. I was like, oh, don't do that, honey. And she was like, oh, okay, mommy. And everything was always perfect until this last week. And that's because my expectation on our relationship was that it was pretty much perfect, that we understood each other, that we jived. And then she had something really big happen in her life and she didn't tell me about it. And then a couple weeks later, then I'm like, oh, how was this? And she's like, oh, that happened 2 weeks ago. And I was like devastated. Not because she didn't tell me, but because I had unrealistic expectations. She's 15. She is not going to tell me everything that happens in her life. But I felt like, oh, we're so perfect. Everything's so great. And our whole fight was over my expectations for our relationship that I could have just asked. I could have kept that line of communication open and talked and let her know that if she wanted to come talk to me, she could, not just assuming she's going to come talk to me when big things happen. So even bringing that back into parenting and asking and letting them know, telling them, hey, you can talk to me whenever you need to, but I'm not going to expect you to come and tell me everything, when that's what I was doing. was expecting her to come and tell me everything.
That is a really fantastic life lesson.
It was some big life lesson. Lots of conversation over the dining room table this last week.
Well, I'm glad that things have worked themselves out and you got to grow in the process.
Exactly.
That's always a fun experience, even if it's painful when we're going through it.
It was so painful. She's not going to tell me anything anymore, I'm sure. But again, just another way of expectations and our perception of our relationships. It can be in anything.
So with that, I think we'll wrap up here and just send out that quick reminder that look at your expectations when you're looking at feelings that you're having towards another person. When you're feeling disappointed, frustrated, angry, sad, even happy, joyful, elated, look at what expectation you put on the other person, what expectation was met or what expectation wasn't met, and turn that back around on yourself. Do some internal work because you can't control your outside circumstances. The only thing you can control is on the inside, how you feel, how you react, how you are going to respond to situations. So if you think about that, turn that back around and really look at what your expectations were and how you can shift those expectations. And drop us a line and let us know how that goes as you go throughout the next few days and give that a try.
And then while you're there, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so that you can be there next week when we do week 3 of Perceptions.
Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you all.